Hi YouTube. Now 2 days ago I received a leaflet and a form. The subject was signing on to a new digital database of healthcare. The UK government is gradually putting the entire nation's personal healthcare records onto a healthcare database. This in spite of the fact that the government has a terrible record on data security. It lost a huge amount of personal data held by the organisation which hands out child allowances, and that's not the only example of lost data. So what did I receive? Well, I received an NHS summary care record. It gave me the expected blurb about how much safer it would be to treat me in an emergency if a doctor could access my personal health record online. It told me that I have two choices. I can do nothing, in which case my health records will be put onto the system automatically, or I can fill in an opt-out form stating that I do not want my records on the database. Now for the misleading bit, the weasel words. There's a large headline which tells me that I can change my mind at any time. But when you read the smaller print underneath the headline, it turns out that yes, you can change your mind if you opt out, but once you're on the database, you can't change your mind. It says, if you choose not to have a summary care record but then change your mind later, we can still make one for you. You need to let your GP practice know. If you choose after we have made your summary care record that you do not want it, you need to tell your GP practice. We will make sure that healthcare staff who try to look at your summary care record will not be able to. We will only make your record available again if whoever wants to see it asks in writing and investigation has found it necessary. So you have the right to block it, it seems. But if somebody decides they want it and they write and ask for it, then you can't block it. And then it goes on to say, you can ask to have your record deleted, but that may not be possible if the record has already been used to give you care, which you can be sure it will have done. So it turns out that the headline is completely wrong. You can't change your mind at any time once you're in. You can only change your mind if you're not in. You can change your mind and get put in. Okay, well, what about if you've got children? The heading is Children and the Summary Care Record. Children will automatically have a summary care record made for them. If you don't want your child to have a summary care record, you will need to fill in an opt-out form on behalf of your child and return it to your child's GP practice. In some circumstances, your GP may feel it is in your child's best interest to have a summary care record. For example, if your child has a serious allergy that healthcare staff treating your child should know about. So it seems as though that bit is a little bit ambiguous. They say that you have the right to opt out on behalf of your child, but at the same time they say that the GP presumably may override your decision. It's not really very clear. It's it's left in a very ambiguous state, and I think that's deliberate. So you can get more information, it seems, at the address www.nhscarerecords.nhs.uk. So I went there and I found, again, repeated the misleading information that whatever you decide, you can change your mind at any time, but you need to let your GP practice know. No, that's not true. You can't change your mind once you've allowed them to make a record for you. How do I find out who has looked at my summary care record? Well, healthcare staff will ask you every time they need to look at your summary care record. If they can't ask you, for example, if you're unconscious, they may look at your record without asking you. If they do this, they will make a note on your record to say why they have done so. So never mind about you being unconscious or not. The worry is that your records can be looked at by anybody you know who happens to work in the NHS. And it seems as though they have to make a note on the record to say why they've done so. But that's reliant on them. You're also told that only the people who are caring for you will have access to your records, but I'm not sure that that's true, actually. And then comes the really dubious bit, and that is the care record guarantee. This is really the small print, and you have to go to yet another website to get that. It says, others may also need to use records about you. So it's not just the people who are caring for you, as you were told originally. Others may need to check the quality of care, protect the health of the general public, keep track of NHS spending, manage the health service, help investigate any concerns or complaints you or your family have about your healthcare, teach healthcare professionals, and the one I like even less is help with research. The law gives you the right to confidentiality under the common law duty of confidentiality, protection in the way information about you is handled under the Data Protection Act 1998, and privacy under the Human Rights Act 1998. Now, this is the bit that is really worrying. These are not absolute rights, as often an individual's rights will need to be balanced with those of others, but they do offer considerable protection. Let's have a look at the Data Protection Act for a moment. The first Data Protection Act came out in 1984, and it was subsequently amended in 1998. There are basically 8 provisions. The most important ones are that data cannot be passed on without the express permission of you, the data subject. And also, they can only hold the data for as long as it's necessary to hold it. You can't hold data which is you don't need to know, so it has to be on a need-to-know basis. For example, a school can't hold data about the incomes that parents have because they don't actually need to know it. Now, I've been noticing for some time that the Data Protection Act seems to no longer be worth the paper it's written on. I get mountains of junk mail, and I always check boxes to say that I don't want data passed on. So I believe that there's a complete free-for-all on my personal data. In reality, the Data Protection Act doesn't protect me at all. This document confirms that. But what it says is very, very interesting. It says that my individual rights will always be superseded by the rights of the majority. I quote, "These are not absolute rights. As often an individual's rights will need to be balanced with those of others." A law which gives you protection should not have any exclusion clauses. I don't think the Data Protection Act did have exclusion clauses when it first came out, but now it seems that it does. Some time ago, I watched a brilliant video by Edward Griffin. I've left a link below and it's in my favourites on my channel. I definitely recommend you to watch it. Edward Griffin talks about the categories which we normally use, that is communism, Leninism, fascism, socialism, even Fabianism. He explains them all, and I can say for myself that watching this video really helped me to understand things in a way that nothing else has. I think you'll agree that the terms are very confusing as they're used in different ways by different people, and it's difficult to see much difference between them. For example, fascism and communism. Anyway, he talks about these categories and explains that we needn't worry about them. What we are really looking at, he says, is collectivism versus individualism. If we want to be free, he says, we need to live under a system where our individual rights are protected. Now, this is the opposite to what is happening in Britain at the moment, and that's confirmed by this NHS statement. What does this mean in practical terms? Well, let's take an example. If it's in the interests of the majority for the over 65s to be offered voluntary euthanasia, then that's what should happen according to this. You've got to balance the needs of the individual against the needs of the majority. So when the bankers have pinched all the pension funds and released the individual's property through an equity release scheme, the interests of the majority will be best served by sending a euthanasia van to the individual's home. No doubt you think I'm scaremongering, but this article that I'm putting up now shows that voluntary euthanasia is being offered in Holland to anybody who is over the age of 70 and depressed. Yes, you heard right, over the age of 70 and depressed. And we're not talking about terminal illness here, we're talking about somebody who's depressed. And what's more, this disgusting rag, the Daily Mail, does not even think it's worthy of comment. How convenient an NHS database for the whole country could be. Think this doesn't concern you? Are you too young, perhaps? Well, what if you've a child who's disabled? What if the interests of the majority were one day deemed to be that disabled children are a burden on society? Get the message? No disabled child, maybe, but I wouldn't mind betting there are plenty of you with children who have some form of special educational needs. Dyslexia, ADHD, autistic spectrum disorder. I'm sure that statistically these children are more likely to commit crimes. So could this data, very conveniently found by means of a database search, be used to select children for a pre-crime programme? Yes, you heard this correctly. The government has proposed identifying children who have not yet committed a crime, but who are deemed to be likely to commit one. Presumably, they'll be subjected to a government indoctrination programme, possibly using neuro-linguistic programming, which some say has already been responsible for over 40 suicides in Bridgend, South Wales. Okay, let's have a look at the rest of this guarantee, shall we? The next page says we have a duty to maintain accurate records of the care we provide to you, keep records about you confidential, secure and accurate, including after you die. Well, we weren't told that in the main booklet that was sent out to people. You weren't told that you wouldn't even have your record deleted after your death. I mean, this is just unbelievable. What about the provision in the Data Protection Act which says that you can keep the data only as long as it's necessary? Why would it be necessary for them to keep the data after your death? It's certainly not to treat you as they stated in the original booklet. So I think that, you know, we're being misled here. And I find this very, very sinister. I cannot imagine why they would want to keep information after you die. Now, I do understand that pretty well all the politicians and celebrities are going to opt out of this because they obviously don't want their data peddled around, and presumably if you're well known, the 30-year rule, the rule that historically they can look into records after 30 years would apply, and so you certainly don't want your data, if you're well known, to be on the database. I don't know what happens if you become well known after you've already gone on this database. It's good practice for people in the NHS who provide your care to discuss and agree with you what they are going to record about you. Well, I don't really believe this. I can't see this happening. This never happens. I've certainly never been asked by any doctor to agree to what they're going to record about me on paper, so I can't imagine this will happen on digital records. So I think we're being misled here. It then goes on to say, we will not share health information that identifies you, particularly with other government agencies, unless we have to do this by law. In other words, we won't disclose it unless we feel like it. Because remember, the law can be made to say anything. And if you're the government, you can interpret the law in any way you want to interpret it. And the provision which I find potentially the most sinister is the one which says that they can share information about you if, quote, we have special permission because the public good is thought to be of greater importance than your confidentiality. Now this leads the way to some difficulties for people, potentially. For example, if the government decided that it wanted people to have mandatory flu vaccines and you didn't want to have a flu vaccine, then they could easily do a search on the database to find out which people had not taken the shot, and you might find the police arriving at your door, potentially. Then it goes on to say, if we share information without your permission, we will make sure that we keep to the Data Protection Act 1998. Well, we know that that's not worth the paper it's written on, so let's move on. And we also find this little gem here. We will take appropriate steps to make sure information about you is accurate. Now that fits with the Data Protection Act, which states that the data that is held about the data subject must be accurate. You will be given opportunities to check records about you. Nothing different there, because I think you can check your paper records as well, and point out any mistakes. And then it goes on to say, we will normally correct factual mistakes. Well, I find that absolutely incredible. We will normally correct factual mistakes. So this isn't a situation where the doctor disagrees about what's been said in the interview or something like that. This is actual factual mistakes that will only normally be corrected. In other words, won't always be corrected, and you certainly can't rely on the fact that factual mistakes will be corrected. Now, I don't very often go to the doctor, but I did go to the doctor a couple of months ago, I think it was, and it wasn't actually the doctor, to be fair, it was a nurse, and the nurse asked me about my diabetes, and I thought, well, you know, I didn't think I was fat, and I said, well, I don't have diabetes, so, you know, what's going on here? And she said, oh, I'm sorry, she said, I've just looked at your record and it says family history, no diabetes. So that's the sort of thing that can happen. I'm not being critical of the nurse concerned, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. But the idea of factual mistakes only being normally corrected, I think, horrifies me. I would imagine that on the paper records, factual mistakes at least will be corrected. It then goes on to say, if you're not happy with an opinion or comment that has been recorded, we will add your comments to the record. Well, you know, that's not very satisfactory either. Really, I thought previously it said that a doctor would ask you to agree what had been said in the interview. But now it seems that they can write whatever they like, they don't have to agree it, and your comments can be added at the end. But obviously, you know, if there's some dispute about what was said, then the doctor's word is going to carry far more weight than yours. And yet we were told earlier something totally different, which was that the doctor had to agree with you first. I find this just so misleading that I just don't trust it. Okay, we're still on the guarantee, which it seems to me is anything but a guarantee. So here's the crowning glory. Talking about people accessing your health records, it says, quote, "Some of the older computer systems will only record who has accessed a record where they've made changes. So your best mate down the pub who happens to work for the NHS can access your records, but providing he or she doesn't make any changes, in other words, doesn't edit your record, there won't be any evidence of the fact that they've accessed it." So that really is the crowning glory, that really is security. And of course I'm being a bit sarcastic here. So in summary, do I think that you should go for opting out of this digital record of your health? Or do I think that you should do nothing, which means that you will automatically be opted in? Well, obviously I can't really advise you. It's up to you to decide. But I think we're living in a very threatening world at the moment. We know, for example, that in America they are on the point of introducing detention without trial for American citizens, which is really very alarming. We have similar sort of things happening in Britain. I don't think this is a time to take a risk of getting onto a database like this. At least that's my opinion, and I'm going for the opt-out. I wonder where this is all heading. We know that changes are being made so imperceptibly that we don't notice them. Could it be that in a few years they'll be claiming that the database is overloaded and difficult to access, so we need to have our data, for example, in a chip on our wrist? If that happens, we'll all be slaves of the bankers. Think it's impossible? Then watch the Verichip Advert. I've left a link for it below. I think you may change your mind when you've seen that. Even if this isn't stage 1 of chipping the population, even if the database is not the first thing they do before they insist on us all having chips, and even if you rarely visit your doctor, think what an insurance company could do with your data.